Hi, I'm Alana from Alana Jade Studio, and welcome to another episode of Women Who Are Doing Business Differently. I'm chatting with my little sister today, Koren Helbig. We're going to talk, we're going to talk about how to create a values aligned business. And I think when we talk about values aligned business, often what comes to mind is, well, first of all, what does that actually mean? How does that actually look? Is it possible to create a financially abundant and really successful business at the same time of having a business that is aligned with your values? And the big question that I often get asked is, how the heck do you even figure out what your values are? So that's what we'll explore today with my little sister, Koren. So to give you a bit of a back context, Koren is probably one of the best examples. She is one of the best examples I've seen of someone who has reworked her life and her business to bring it back into alignment with her values. So Koren started out as a freelance journalist, working for a number of different newspapers here in Australia. Then she took her writing abroad to Spain and did freelance, I would say journalism, but also storytelling in a number of forms. Then she returned to Australia and worked for a very well-known charity here. And recently she has started her own online business and in her little home in Adelaide, and which she's currently renovating sustainably, which is an awesome story. You should go check it out. So currently she's working in a part-time gig with an organisation that's very aligned with her values, and I'm sure she'll tell you more about that. But she's also working on a number of her own projects, including freelance writing column for ABC Gardening, offering digital strategy consulting to other online businesses, and running her very popular honesty stall, The Local Yum, which you should definitely go and check out on Instagram because it's so freaking cute. It's just so cute. It's really cute. I'll leave the link to Instagram to the Instagram profile in the notes with this blog. So as you can hear, Koren has a lot going on, but what you'll see in this interview is that she's been doing it all in a way that supports her well-being, connects really beautifully with her community, is financially abundant, and most importantly, makes her truly happy and fulfilled. And I think that these are all beautiful signposts that Koren has created a business that is aligned with her values. So after that really long intro, welcome, Koren.
Wow, thanks. That's a heck of an intro. What a lot to live up to.
You can use all of that in your bio if you like. I know it's awesome.
And of course, you're not biased at all about, being my sister.
I've watched very closely from the sidelines, so I think I can do a very fair summary of how awesome you are.
Thank you.
So let's dive in. So tell us firstly, when and how did you realize you needed to align your work life with your values?
I actually think I've had this realization twice, and I reckon I'm probably going to have it another 2 or 3 or 4 times in the course of my life, because I've realized that it's something that you have to keep returning to, and it's very easy to kind of stray away and not realize, and then kind of be like, oh, hang on a sec, I'm out of alignment again, and then have to have the whole realization again. So I think the first time for me was back in 2012. So I was working for a major metropolitan daily newspaper up in Brisbane, and I just started to feel and living with you in our little greenhouse, and it was awesome. And we were blogging together and doing a heap of really cool stuff that felt really in alignment. And the more that I did that, the more I realized that my work life perhaps wasn't aligning with who I wanted to be and what I wanted to do in the world, especially the company that I was working for and who owns that company. So that's when I made the decision to move to Spain and sort of do life differently there. And that went really great for 4 years and was totally awesome. And then I came home to Australia and did it here for a year as well. And then I had an opportunity to go and take another full-time job, and it was a really great opportunity, and I grabbed it with both hands. And yeah, over the course of the next 3 years, slowly realized that, oh shit, I'm actually out of alignment again. And so that was when I had realization number 2 and had to course correct. So yeah, it's been really interesting to go through that a second time, because it's made me realize that this is not a static thing. You're not like, right, these are my values, cool, decision made, done, tick, move on. It's I think it's something you've got to keep consciously thinking about and checking in with and course correcting.
Absolutely. I would 100% agree. It is always such an evolving process. And I think too, with the situation that the world is in and how fast, just all the different things that are going on in the world, but also how fast things change too. But the nature of perhaps our values, particularly the values that we have, our values are very similar. And I know probably many of the other women and men who listen to this would probably have similar values to us because they're part of our community. Those values are maybe not so much in alignment with the greater things that the world are valuing right now. Capitalism, consumerism, overconsumption, money over, profit over sustainability, everything else. And so I think it's very easy to get drawn back into that old paradigm, or that current paradigm that feels very old for us now. And so you kind of do have to keep on it all the time and just reassessing and reevaluating, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the big thing that people often, question is, how do we figure out what our values are? That can be one of the trickiest things when we first go on this journey. So can you tell us what your values are and what that process was for figuring them out?
Yeah. Well, I think that you and I are quite lucky in our family that we were given these really strong values as kids from our parents, particularly around the environment and protecting the environment, caring for the environment. So I think that's always been a really strong thread that our whole family has had throughout our lives. But I have to say, it probably wasn't really something I considered or focused on, gave a lot of focused thought to when I did that first breakaway, when I first moved to Spain. I kind of thought, I want to do things differently. I don't want to work a 9 to 5 anymore. I don't want to flog myself until I'm sick working for an organization that doesn't align with me. I want to care more about the environment. And that was kind of it. And that was a good starting point. But what I found was, after I came home in 2017, I did my permaculture design certificate. And that's where I learned the 3 ethics that are involved in that movement, being earth care, people care, and fair share. And they were really easy to remember, and they just felt right for me. They really aligned with what felt right to me. And so that, I think, since those ethics quite firmly and strongly came into my life, it's been a lot easier to assess whether I'm on the right track or not. So I guess in terms of like how does that apply? If I look at earth care, that's protecting and caring for our natural environment in my work and personal life. So choosing to work with people who look after the environment or are involved in sustainability, that kind of thing, rather than just choosing any old client. People care, that one's been really strong, a big one for me personally, because I am a workaholic. I do have a tendency to overwork, so I like to apply that people care ethic to myself around how can I care for myself in a way that's going to keep me going and not knock me down, I guess. But also caring for everyone, our community, making decisions that help other people and lift other people up rather than knocking them down. And fair share, I think that's all about sharing your yield, sharing whatever abundance you have. That could be money or time or skills or cooking or literally anything. For me, it's meant donations, so donating to Indigenous-led organisations, paying the rent, as they call it, and also donating to environmental organisations that are doing great work in the climate crisis space. But yeah, volunteering has been a big one for me too, giving my time. So I've got a lot of skills that I've honed over years, and there's a lot of organisations that really need communication skills. So dipping in and doing little projects here and there as a volunteer, I consider to be fair share. So yeah, I think the really amazing thing about having those 3 ethics and thinking about them regularly is that they kind of have now just been woven through my whole life, including my work life. And the response that has come from that realignment has just been insane, actually, personally, definitely, but professionally, I'm just getting opportunities coming out of the woodwork daily, it feels like, which can be a bit overwhelming, but it's just so amazing to be like, wow, I've gotten really clear on what's important to me in ways that are going to help myself as well as others. And then suddenly all of this opportunity that's really aligned starts to come my way. So yeah, powerful.
Yeah, really powerful. I think that's a really good signpost of having, like, running from your values is those opportunities that come, but also I also found that, like, the timing of it, like, it's really interesting how things line up so like beautifully when you're it's like you're in that momentum of it or something. I just something that you mentioned back in the first question that I just actually wanted to pull out, because I think it's interesting for people who as of course we've got a notebook, so it's just like, come back now, terrible interviewer, but I think it's interesting for people who are maybe just first on the journey. And that's when you said right at the start in your journey, you were like, we'd started blogging and we were doing all of these things that felt more in alignment with our values. And then because of that, your work situation at the time was starting to feel more and more misaligned. And I think that's a really good telltale sign that you're actually uncovering what your values are. So I think for people listening, if they are feeling really incongruent in some area in their life, to not like beat yourself up that you're not, where Koren is with all of the opportunities that are coming her way or something like that is one of the big steps, is that when you start to do things that are more in alignment with your values, things that aren't in alignment get more like uncomfortable. And that's just a part of that uncovering process.
Yeah, definitely. The discomfort is a signpost, and that can be really powerful. And I think the other thing is, like, I didn't jump all at once. Like, by the time I was ready to leave for Spain, I think we'd had the blog, I can't remember, I think it was 2 years or something like that. We had been playing in that space for quite a while for free. I wasn't getting paid for that. I know not everyone's got the time or energy to put into free things, but I guess what I'm getting at is, if you're starting to feel like, oh, is this the right way for me? An easy way to kind of experiment is to just pick something really small that's it's not going to matter if you fail, it's not going to matter if it doesn't make you money, it's literally just to play in a different headspace or a different way of being, and see both how that feels, but how does it make you feel about the rest of your life? And it's probably the rest of your life bit that's the biggest signpost. Because that's exactly what happened. We were blogging about sustainability and living more ethically and supporting really great organizations, and then I was like, ooh, am I supporting that in my work life? I'm not sure.
It's interesting because we both went through pretty much the same thing at the same time. So that was
some fun years.
They were really fun, but a bit uncomfortable at times.
deeply uncomfortable.
So let's talk about how those values, those 3 permaculture ethics and what you're now using as your values inform the way that you do business. So whatever kind of comes to mind, but it could be work hours or the way that you choose clients, create content, what you offer, any of those pillars of business.
Yeah, okay. I think the big one is client selection, who I choose to work with. That's both in my freelance side of the business and my employee side of the business. So yeah, I mean, this would probably never happen now because of the way that I've been communicating for such a long time. But imagine if a fossil fuel company came to me and said like, hey, would you want to work with me? You know, that would be a pretty easy flat no, probably for a lot of people. Actually probably a terrible example, but you know, imagine if I don't know, a clothing company came to me and said, yep, do you want to help me market my business or whatever? My first port of call is always having a look through like, who is this person, what is their business, what are their values? You know, like, so I'm actively thinking, do they have similar values to me? And if I found out that most of their clothes was made in China and they didn't have any of the kind of ethical structures around manufacturing overseas, or they were making all of their products out of unsustainable fabrics or something like that, that would still be a no for me. And
can I ask you something there about that? Because I too have been in that situation with a skincare company that tested on animals, or someone who wanted me, a beautiful man, but the work he was doing was for a hunting organization, and so that's very directly against, you know, what I want to support. But I could have really done with that work at the time. You know, I had some space, I could have filled that, I could have done with the cash. And so it was really hard to say, look, no, that doesn't work, you know, like that what do you say to those kinds of situations?
Yeah, that's really tough. Really tough. I think in Spain I struggled with that a lot because I was just starting out as a freelancer. I didn't have anywhere near as many opportunities. My values weren't as defined. And and I was pitching like a mad woman, you know, pitching and getting rejected daily was kind of like my experience for those first couple of years in Spain, rejected as a freelance journo. So yeah, I totally understand how hard that is. And you could look at that two ways. You could be like, I'm going to cut myself some slack because I'm under financial stress, and being under financial stress doesn't help me either. And just say, I'm going to say yes to this opportunity for a time limited period, knowing that it's not aligned, but it's going to get me out of stress and help me be in a more balanced position. Or if you've got the privilege, the financial privilege to be able to say no to work like that, I always find that when you say no to something that's not, I often find when you say no to something that's not super aligned, something that is more aligned comes in to fill that vacuum. So not filling up all of your space, especially when you know it's not quite right, is actually pretty powerful. Yeah, and I guess it's also a bit of an opportunity to look at your values again and wonder and think about whether you're communicating them effectively enough. Like that person who's come to you and asked for your help, who doesn't really align with you, why did they think that you were going to be a good person to work with? You know, they should have come to your website or your Instagram or read your emails or whatever and gone, no, not quite for me, because that is marketing. You know, you're turning on the people you want to work with, but you're also turning off the people you don't want to work with, because that saves you a shitload of time. You don't have to be chasing leads or figuring out how to say no to people politely or whatever. So yeah, I guess that's the third option. Have a look at your communication and what can you sharpen up or make clearer so that that person doesn't come knocking again, but just the right person does next time.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thanks. That's really good advice. Must go have a look at my website.
Just remove hunting from your website, Alana.
Yeah, I like to work with. So random. YouTube, that's where it came from. Thanks, YouTube. Yeah, so sorry, that was really valuable, but any other ways that values inform your business?
So the other big thing I'm working on, this is a stretch area for me, and I'm going to say right up, I'm not doing a very good job of it, but work hours. So, you know, when I had the first realization over a decade ago, I realized at that point that I didn't want to work for full-time anymore, because I have these workaholic tendencies, and I overwork, and I do actually make myself physically sick. So I made that commitment, and then since then I've gone back and forth and sort of not always managed to stay true to that. But I guess not working full time is really important to me from that people care ethic. And I also find that if I give myself more space in my week, then I am much more creative and things flow a lot more easily. I'm much more easily able to write, or I don't feel overwhelmed by my inbox of things that I need to reply to or whatever. So I'm kind of in a period at the moment where I'm working 5 days a week because I have taken on a fairly large temporary project. So that's going to consume a few more months, but I'm really looking forward to getting really firm boundaries on that work hours element, and trying to pull back to the 4 days a week and just open up a little bit more space. And on that 5th day, I'm not saying that I won't work. I love leaving it free. No bullshit on that day. It's not like I'll go catch up with blah and do that and run this errand. No, it's like, it's just a day to wake up and be like, what do I actually feel like doing today? And some days I went and volunteered at a local urban farm because I wanted to learn a bit more about food growing. Some days I lay in my garden staring at the chickens. Other days I was like, I really feel like writing a blog post or writing something on Instagram. So it's not like, do not work on this day. It's more like, here is a space. Use it as you feel on the day without booking. Because I don't think we do that very often. We don't really book space and have no expectations of what will happen inside that space.
Totally. And I think that's you can even use that as a good experiment, or, you know, like investigation on what you're being drawn to on those days, because I imagine that would also help you reflect on like where you're interested in, or what, like it would help you reflect on your values again, in that sense, like what are you actually doing in that time. And I think too with the hour thing, like I'm the same. I'm like you, very much a workaholic, and have to keep on top of that all the time. And I think that there's also an ebb and a flow to it as well. Like you have this exciting project that you've taken on now, and it feels good and exciting to do that and work in that, and it might actually be energizing for you rather than depleting. But knowing that that's not how you want to work for, you know, ever, or even for multiple months at a time. It's just a short period. And then also allowing yourself to have that rest on the flip side of it as well, because I think we think from working in the corporate world that it's like flat out or nothing, kind of flat out or nothing. But because we're taught that you just keep doing the same thing and showing up in the same way for the same set amount of money over and over again. But that's not really how it works when you work for yourself. It is more of an ebb and flow.
I love, you said this to me a few months ago, and I love this. I think you said it to me around learning clarinet. Can't remember, pull me up if I'm wrong, but you said something about, at the moment, my favorite way of approaching stuff is to commit to a short period of time, like commit to 10 weeks of lessons or whatever, and I give it my all in that period, but it doesn't feel so, I don't even know the word, like locked in, because I'm just committing, and then at the end I assess, and then if I want to keep going, great. And I totally love that. That's awesome. I then applied that to salsa dancing and have realized that I love it. So that's been really cool. But I have wondered, like, what would it be like to apply that kind of thinking to business as well? Like, rather than trying to maybe land a client for 2 hours a week ongoing, being like, hey, I'm coming in with this particular project that will take me 2 months, and how do you feel? I mean, I guess that's kind of some of the offerings that I've started developing. Oh my God, realization while talking. That's exactly what I've been creating. Okay, great. That's why those packages seemed like a good fit then.
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
Yeah,
just not being that lock it in all or nothing sort of approach that we so often are pushed into, I think.
Yeah, totally. And I think that, you know, I just released a new offering, which is like day rates for for people with an existing Squarespace website. It's like, let's just get this done in this short period of time, like in a day. Give me your wish list and I can do as much as I can done in that time. And a similar philosophy with my 1 week websites, because I've worked out from my values that this is how I like to work. And so I've crafted, and this is where I do my best work, my most creative work. I feel most enlivened. So I've worked out packages that fit into that. But I think the other thing that you're talking about there as well is like I implemented, probably since I started this new phase of my business, but like 90-day planning. So every 3 months I reassess what I'm doing and I pick certain projects that I'm going to work on in that time for my own business, so that it is that shorter period of time. It's enough to it's chunky enough that you get some really good, you can do a really good project in it, but it's not so long that you procrastinate or, you know, you feel you can't reassess it at the end of those 3 months. Someone who does that really well and teaches that really well is Danny Gardner, who I interviewed the last interview with this. She does that really well and has like a 3-month planning, and she plans for the seasons and she teaches it. So I'll leave a link for that under this as well, because that's I feel like a really sustainable way of tackling getting things done in your business, but also being able to be flexible and fluid with what you're doing as well.
Yeah, and not locked in, not
so
locked in.
Yeah. Cool. So tell us, I mean, we've kind of touched on this anyway, but there might be some other things you want to talk about here about the benefits of carrying out your business based on your values.
Yeah. Look, I think one of the best things is it just makes my heart happy. You know,
and that should be reason enough, shouldn't it?
Yeah. Like, you know, when you just feel good about what you're doing, and it's sort of like anytime I don't now, I'm like, oh, what's that about? And sometimes I'm not ready to look at it, and that's okay. But yeah, just doing things and feeling that kind of rush of like, yeah, this is so awesome, and that makes me feel like I do better work for clients, or, you know, write better stories or whatever. Have more creative ideas. I mean, like, take the local yum, for example, our little honesty stall that we have out the front of our house. And that was an idea that I'd had for 4 or 5 years, and I just never had the energy to get it off the ground because I was working this really incredibly stressful full-time job, you know, in a 9-to-5 office, except for it was more like 8 to 6 most days. And so once I moved on from that role, I think it was like the next month or something, I was just walking around the neighborhood and I saw these shelves on a landfill pile of a neighbor. Like, he was throwing all this stuff out of his shed, and I was like, oh, shit, that would be really good for that stall idea that I've had. And we knocked on his door and he was like, I've got a van, do you want me to drop it around? Like, okay,
handy.
So cool. And yeah, so we created the stall, and then from that it just went nuts. Like, people just loved it. You know, we ended up getting coverage in national magazines, being asked to present at a festival or in a permaculture calendar. There's like all of these people all over the country who are like, oh my God, honesty stalls in urban areas, it can be done. I'm starting one too. And that's really cool. And you could say like, yeah, okay, great, it was just a good idea or whatever. But the thing about that honesty stall for me is that it's not about making money, and it's not necessarily about, you know, just selling my chutney that I made or whatever. It's actually about, as good as that is, it's actually about values. It's about talking to people about the fact that, you know, our food system is deeply unsustainable. And what would it look like if our cities weren't urban food deserts and we could actually grow food in our backyards to feed our local community? What would it look like if food was grown organically rather than with all the chemicals? What would it look like if we knew our neighbours and would know their names and would talk to them as they walk past our front yard or invite them in for a coffee or a dinner? And that's what's underneath that project. And it's just fascinating to me that, you know, I needed kind of the space and that second realignment of like, hang on, what are my values? To kind of come back to that. And then just out of nothing, out of literally someone's rubbish came this project that has allowed me to connect with all these people and kind of challenge some of the ideas that come with living in the city, that, you know, people aren't trustworthy, that you can't grow food here, that you need to keep your house closed off to all of your neighbors. It's, yeah. So I think that's kind of one of the benefits, is that you just don't really know where it's going to take you or what kind of applications it's going to have, what opportunities it'll open up, I guess.
Yeah, beautiful. And we were talking before, I think this is just like a really good lead in to just maybe talking a little bit about values-based content creation, because I think that this is the local yum is a very, very good example of value-based content creation that is not necessarily related to, you know, what you're quote unquote selling, digital marketing strategy, or in that arm of your business anyway. You're doing lots of other stuff, but that it still has brought you that connection and those opportunities through people understanding what you're really made up of and what you really believe, and feeling that connection, and then wanting to work with you because of that. Yeah, that is a really interesting thing that I've noticed. Like I have, you know, an account for an Instagram account for the local yum and an Instagram account for myself. And, you know, my day job is, like you said, digital marketing and a little bit of freelance journalism. And I don't really talk about that very much. The work that I do, I don't really talk about that very much on either of those channels. I do a little bit on LinkedIn, but not so much on Instagram. And yet I'm getting so many opportunities and so many work offers through Instagram. And I find that really curious, because all I'm doing there is sharing things that I find deeply useful and interesting. But I guess because there's that really strong value system under there, and I'm kind of, I guess in the back of my mind, I'm always like, how can I use this as a little way to indoctrinate people about growing organic food? Or like, how can I use this as a little way to kind of encourage people to notice when their neighborhood has been sprayed and maybe go talk to their council? Or so even though none of that is about marketing, I do share some of my journalism stories, but pretty much nothing about marketing. I'm finding all of these people like, oh my God, can you help? And they're all super aligned. They're all like local food businesses, or like organic flower growers, or, you know, all this an ethical fashion company, which is, I find that really curious, because that's actually not something I would necessarily recommend to a client. Like, I would never say, don't ever talk about your work ever. I probably need to look at my own strategy a little bit more. But I guess what that shows is that you don't have to always be talking about your product or what you're selling, or, you know, what your business is doing. And I think you do that really well too, Alana. Like sometimes you'll just muse on business minimalism or something, and you're not really talking about like selling that. You're just like, I had this thought today, or I noticed today. And that's really, really powerful. So having those really solid values and then weaving them into whatever you're talking about. I think people they get a real sense of who you are. And then maybe they're like, what does this person even do? Oh, they do marketing. I need that. Maybe I'll send a message, like maybe.
So yeah, it's not even something I'd really consciously thought about before this conversation, but reflecting on it, it's like, wow, that's probably why that's having that impact.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. And, I think the first time that I was really tipped off to this idea of values-based content is because of She Makes Magic. But years later, She Makes Magic was not really, that's our old podcast, if anyone's wondering, a podcast that we did together, but really wasn't related to any of the work that we're doing now. But what I found is that when I started selling selling websites, people coming to me and saying, I found you through She Makes Magic, or I found you through your other podcast, and have been wanting to work with you and just been waiting for the right, for the right thing. And it made me think, like, why is that these two seemingly unrelated things keep people connected with me, to my community, and coming back to me? And I think it's purely what you're saying there, is that the values that are underpinning that, and more people want that they're looking for that deeper connection, and that to then filter through into the work that you're doing for them. It's not so much anymore about buying a product or buying a service. It's like all of the values and ethics that encompass what you're doing as well is so very important.
And in this age of greenwashing, where so many brands are just like, oh yeah, we donate like 1% of profits, and never report how much money they've donated, or do all of these things they say they're doing, but there's not much proof. Well, firstly, I think that's where sort of like small businesses have huge power, because you can relate a lot more personally and talk about the people within your organization and what you truly believe. So that's really powerful versus a larger brand. But also people can potentially follow you as a person back through some of what you've done previously and see, oh yeah, this person's actually been doing this for years. They're not just, they're not just saying it, they actually mean it.
On
they're
the
walking
fad.
the talk. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So,
saying the latest things to get the likes and so on.
Yeah. And the cash in the door.
Yeah, absolutely. There's something I was going to ask you about that, but it's gone. Yeah.
Pity you don't have a notebook.
I know. What the hell? Oh, well, it'll come back in like 3 questions time, and then I'll be like, can we just swoop back around to so we've talked about like all the good, cool things that can come from running values-based, but I mean, with everything that we do or choose, there comes sacrifices, or some not so great things. Do you feel like, can you touch on that for us? What might have been some of the downfalls of doing business in this way?
Yeah, I mean, it's really challenging to live this way in some respects, because, I mean, for example, last year I went for 2 jobs that were both pretty great, and got offered both roles at the same time. And they were both like relatively well aligned, but one was a lot more aligned than the other. And the less aligned one paid so much more, just like an astonishingly higher amount. And so I had this decision, like money or what matters to me. And I know that I'm speaking from a position of privilege here. I obviously recognize that I'm really lucky to be able to be financially stable enough to make that choice, and to have those opportunities. So having said that, it was really tough to decide, and I think the old me this whole realization around I need to put what's important to me front and center in all areas of my life, not just my personal life, I probably would have just gone the money route. But I didn't. I chose the lesser paying job, and it always feels like a jumping off of a cliff. Like, oh God, like jumping into the free fall, like if I made the right decision. But yeah, I guess you just got to have a bit of faith that it will kind of come together, which, yeah, it did. And I guess the other thing is that idea that I was talking about right at the beginning, that this is not a static thing. It's not like I decide my values, tick, it's done, because we're all growing and changing. The world is growing and changing. I'm thinking about things now that I didn't even know I should be aware of, you know, like my privilege as a white middle class woman living in Australia. I wasn't even really aware of that 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So as you become more aware and more informed, I think, well, my values are definitely shifting. And I think it's only really in the last year and a half that I've A, realized that's the thing, and B, realized I need to keep checking in and reassessing. It's not just I made the decision, I jumped off the cliff, done. Like there's probably lots of little cliffs to jump off all along the way.
That got dark quick.
In a good way, like there's water underneath or something, or you're wearing a parachute, it's fine. You're gonna live, you're gonna be better, you're gonna fly. There we go, that's the metaphor I was looking for. Yes, jump the cliff and fly. Yeah, and you know, you are doing well. For me, I should speak for my own personal experience. I know that some of what I'm doing is quite different. It's like you were saying earlier, it's different to the dominant paradigm that we're living in, and people can find that really challenging. Even something as simple as wanting to work part-time. Like I remember a recent CEO that I worked with, when I told him that I wanted to work part-time, he was like, but what about your career? And I was like, what about it? And he was like, well, how are you ever going to become an executive or a CEO if you work part-time? And I was like, well, have you heard about those two awesome chicks who ran the inquiry into banking? They, you know, managed it together and had a managed team. And he was like, I just can't ever see that working. You know, and it's really hard when you're pushed up against someone like that who's in a position of power and is just shutting down any of these other ways of being. It's hard to be firm in your decisions and when you're kind of confronted with that. So yeah, I guess my only advice there is just go gently. You know, if you can't do it right now, that's okay. Even just acknowledging that you know what you stand for and you want to do better at some point is a step in the right direction, because most people don't think about this. I think most people, what I've realized is that most people, or there's a large section of society who do care, and they're quite firm in, you know, what they believe is right for the world in whatever area their particular interest focus is. But they leave that at the door when they go to work.
Yes.
And they're like, that's separate, you know, that's my personal life. I got to be this robot in this corporate world. Yeah. And that's part of the problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think if more people layered that over the top of their working life, you know, figured out their values and then layered that over the top of their working life, we'd all be in a much better place.
Yeah, totally. 100% agree with that. And I sort of think about this concept of, I kind of stole it a little bit from Sarah Wilson, because she talked about loneliness burnout or something like this in one of her books. But I noticed that a similar thing is happening from moral burnout. And that's what you're describing there, is that we have these values which we may or may not use in our personal life, but when we go to work or we sit down in front of our desk to run our businesses, we aren't running them in alignment with our values. And I believe that results in moral burnout, and where, you know, burnout is burnout, however that looks, but I think it's morally what causes it, because we sacrifice these fundamental underlying aspects of ourselves to make money, and that is just absolutely not sustainable. So it is not surprising that people burn out and get sick, or they're suffering mental illnesses or anxiety or depression, or You know, that's what happens, especially because we have to work so much to be able to just get by in the way that, you know, or perceive we have to work so much to get by in the way that our society is and monetary systems are currently structured.
Yeah, that's so true. And it's really challenging. I think that's an opportunity if you're running your own business that's the beauty, one of the beauties of running your own business. You know, if you're in a really large organization, and my experience has been the larger the organization, the more toxic the culture becomes.
Yeah.
It becomes more heavily bureaucratic, more hierarchical, less human connection, more dismissal of individual values for corporate norms that might be highly out of alignment. That's such a hard place to feel like you can make any difference. But if you're lucky enough to do a bit of work for yourself or run your own business, you actually have the power to change that and be part of a new movement of people who run their businesses according to, you know, the values with which they'd live their personal life.
Yeah.
And you can sort of see it popping up and seeing all these really cool businesses. One I've really been liking the look of lately is the Digital Picnic, which I think they're based in Melbourne, and it's a digital agency. And yeah, if you have a look at their socials, this is just a business run by a woman in a way that most businesses are not in Australia. It's awesome. The way she champions her people and respects neurodiversity and all of these different amazing things. And I think we're kind of lucky in a way that we're at this juncture in the world where we're starting to see some really good examples of how it can be if it's different.
Yeah.
You know, that wasn't as obvious 10 years ago, I don't think.
No.
And once there's more examples, more people are like, oh, that is possible. I mean, take working from home because of COVID, you know.
Yes.
That was, working from home was crazy. Who would do that? How the world will fall apart. And now it's like, oh, it's no big deal. And actually everyone loves it. So yeah, it's just really cool to kind of see these paradigms being slowly broken down a little bit. And I think as small business owners, we can play a pretty cool role in pushing that forward. And that will eventually, hopefully, filter across into the ginormous toxic
machine.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you. So I guess for touching on all of this, I know that there would be people who are probably still working in the corporate environment listening to this, and there would be some people who have their own businesses or in situations where it's kind of like half or a fraction here and a fraction there. Can you give some practical steps or one or two pieces of advice for people in those situations where they could start moving more towards a values-based business or income-making model? It doesn't necessarily need to be for your own business either.
Yeah. I think the easiest way to start would be just sort of writing down and maybe thinking in your personal life, because that's often easier, writing down what's important to you, like what needs to be true in the world for you to feel good in yourself and in your community. And that could be anything from like, you know, I don't know, sustainability measures to knowing the names of all of your neighbours to, I don't know, whatever it is, just write that all down, get it all down on paper, and then layer that across your working life. Again, this is that step that I think people just don't do. So layering that across what you do for work and seeing where there's alignment and where there's not. And maybe that's enough for now. Maybe it's just an exercise in seeing, and then you just sort of just leave it. Or maybe you start to chip away at little elements of it. I think that can be a really simple and powerful way. If you want to delve much more deeply into it, I would totally recommend you go and have a look at holistic decision making. So this is something that I studied last year with a guy called Dan Palmer. So he's been involved in the permaculture movement for quite a long time. He's a Kiwi who used to live in Australia and has just moved back to New Zealand. But yeah, he does online courses around this, this systems thinking kind of model that was developed by Alan Savory, who is this guy from Zimbabwe who's done a lot of work on sustainable agriculture. And his whole method was around figuring out what is important to a person or an entity, and then creating quality of life statements around that entity. So how do we want to feel in our world? And then outside of those quality of life statements, creating enabling actions. So what do we actually need to do in order to make those feelings happen or be true, to make those quality of life statements be true? It's insanely powerful. And the coolest thing is that you can do this for yourself personally, but you can do it for anything. You can do it for your relationship, your business, a community group you're involved in, anything. And having just gone through it with a little growers collective group I'm involved in, I've realized it's super powerful when there's lots of people, when you're like a group of people coming together. So I can see how it would work really well for a small business, because you actually sit everyone down at the table and work on this map together, and figure out what does quality of life mean for all of the players at this table, and then what does our business need to do in order to make that true for all of us here. And once you've figured out all of that, that's your decision-making tool. So when you have decisions in front of you, you're like, all right, well, let's layer it over this map that we've very clearly articulated. Yes. And how does that align? And if it doesn't align, it either means maybe it's not quite the right opportunity, or your values have shifted. So you kind of get this like really great, if you remember to use it, which is something that's not always easy to do too. But yeah, I have found this so unbelievably powerful. So yeah, holistic decision making is a great one to have a look at.
I'll definitely put a link for that. I mean, you will get me the link and then I'll put
I will.
Any other tips?
Yeah, I think I'm almost considering scheduling like a recurring meeting in my calendar and calling it something lame like values check-in or something, just to actually remind myself to look back at this, because it's so important. And especially if you put the work in to figure it all out, it's such a shame to kind of let it go. It's like a living, breathing thing that exists alongside of you and can actually make decision making a lot easier, because really that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about making decisions in your business, like who will you work with, what kind of content will you write, who are you going to sell stuff to,
how much you're going to
decisions, how much you're going to work, how much money do you need, what kind of lifestyle do you want to have. Like that's there's all little micro decisions that need to happen there in order for that to become true. Totally. So I guess having a really firm value system gives you something more to make a decision from, rather than just, do I want that much more money in my bank account?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's such a good point, because we can, when we run our own businesses, get distracted by things, or we get things which appear on the surface to be really good opportunities, or we get told we should run our business in this XYZ way, and we can just suddenly, we can just shoot off in all of these multiple directions. And I've definitely found, as it sounds like you have as well, that when I keep just coming back to the values and going like, really, is this going to help me get to where I want to be, or support the fundamental aspects of how I want to run my business in this way. And even though on the surface it might look like a really great opportunity or a really great offering or idea, when I delve into it a little bit more, I realized that it's actually not going to take me in the direction that I want to go, and sometimes maybe even in the opposite. And I've found, and this is just trial and error, right? But I've found like that if I try to push through with those things anyway, they never work. Or, you know, they lose momentum. I lose excitement about them. But when I do things that fit those fundamental values for me, they have longevity and sustainability and momentum behind them that other things wouldn't have. And sometimes they don't look like they should, or that they're great ideas or whatever, but because they have my values underpinning them, it works.
Yeah, it's so true. And a lot of people sort of say, you know, follow what feels good, and that's like a really, really great marker. But when you're feeling like lost or overwhelmed or confused, sometimes you're not sure how you feel. Like one morning you're like, this is the greatest idea ever, and the next day you're like, why did I say yes to that? So like it kind of just gives you another tool in the kit to kind of cross-check things against, especially when you're facing a big decision.
Yes.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Is there anything, I don't even know how long we've been chatting for, but probably definitely not the allocated 20 minutes.
3 hours. If anyone's still listening, thank you.
Is there anything else you want to, you know, add or about this conversation?
No, I just want to say thanks, Alana, because this, well, it's been really, really great chat, but also this has reminded me like, oh God, I haven't checked in on my values for a while. So it's been like one of those important kind of, oh God, am I heading into realization number 3?
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it's just been really good to kind of take some time to reflect on, you know, what it all means and how important it and powerful it actually is. So yeah, thanks.
My pleasure. Thank you. It's been the same for me. That's why I want to have these chats. They're just nice and refreshing and good reminders for these things. And is there anything, you know, you want to share? Everyone should definitely go and follow the local Yum because it's, as I said, the cutest. But is there anything else you want to share? How people can find you? Anything you've got upcoming? Any self-promo? Go hard.
Well, I think probably promo moment. Yeah, probably the easiest way to find out what I'm up to is just Instagram, which is just my name, Koren Helbig. That's the main platform I curate. I don't really appear in too many other places because modeling
of your values,
following your model, Alana. Business minimalism. But yeah, I have a website which, you know, I haven't really talked, as per usual, I haven't talked about anything I actually do. So if you're like, but who is this girl though? I do have a website, so you can check it all out there. And yeah, I've sort of started a little newsletter as well, which is just sharing things that I find useful. So if you're interested in like sustainable living, growing organic food, what does permaculture mean in an urban context? That's kind of the space that I'm currently obsessed with and delving into and talking about.
Thanks, Koren.